Welcome to the Freelance Tribe. Here we talk with skilled freelancers about their professional journey. Stay tuned for real-life experiences to learn and actionable steps to take to improve your freelancing career. My name is Yuri. I'm a community builder at Code Control and 9am.works, and my guest is Brian Gallagher, a corporate escape artist and creator of Simple Man Guide, a platform dedicated to helping others leave the corporate world behind, regain power over the most precious asset, time, and build a successful solo business in 90 days. And today we'll discuss a step-by-step approach to starting building a stable, successful solo business. So welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Yuri. Nice to meet you, man.
Let's start very much likewise. And let's start with a little bit of backwards story. So you've been corporate SKP for over 10 years already. So tell me, what was the turning point that made you finally take this leap into solo business?
Today I'll say, first off, it's a very special day. This is my 11th anniversary of being out of corporate.
Yay!
It just so happens that, this podcast fell on this day. I couldn't believe it. It was like the universe saying like, hey, share your story, I call this Freedom Day. This is my own personal holiday that I celebrate every single year to commemorate that, because it was a pretty big move in my life and one that has been, I call it the best career move I made that I didn't actually make because I was asked to leave my job. But I already had this is like by way of background, I was in investment banking for 9 years. There became, some clues and such that this wasn't what I wanted to do. And I felt just some things I felt about the work I was doing and the way that I felt controlled by others. I didn't really have say or any control over my time at all. And when this started to get pretty intense, I'll go back a second, right? When this started to get pretty intense, I started to build a business while in my corporate job. And that was the fitness studio you mentioned earlier, with a buddy of mine who was an ex-colleague. We were working on this for about, I would say probably a year. We probably had a discussion a little before a year before I was let go. When I was let go on this day in 2014, my fitness studio had already been running for 7-8 months. We had customers, we had a lease signed for a new studio. We had an opening date for like when we were going to go and have our own place. So everything was really set up and ready for me to go. Now, a couple of things that I remember, one thing in particular that really never left my mind since it happened. And I was probably in 2000, I would say 8, maybe 2009. I remember going to celebrate a summer holiday at my then girlfriend's family's house. And, it's a big holiday in the US. It's like the unofficial start to summer. So we went to celebrate and hang out by her pool, have drinks with her family. And the day before, I had gotten an email from one of my project bosses and was like, hey, we got this presentation next week. We got to build this model, this presentation. And I sat all weekend in my girlfriend's dad's office doing in Excel, in PowerPoint, watching them, looking out the window at my girlfriend and her family having drinks, jumping in the pool. And I was like, and I realized that my boss was also on the phone. And I was 28, 29 at the time. He was about 40, 41. And I remember thinking like, wow, his holiday weekend's ruined also. Like, what am I working towards here? Is this just what my life is going to be like throughout the rest of my career? And that was really, really something that flipped a switch in my head. Was like, man, if this is not what you want to be doing, you need to make a plan now, or you need to start thinking about how you want to get out of here. Because when you're in those corporate roles, they get pretty comfortable. The pay gets better. The hours get a little less. You start to have people working underneath of you. You see all these benefits that you have, like health insurance and retirement and all these things. And once you start feeling how comfortable they are, and once you have a lifestyle that has been built up to kind of, adjust to that pay scale, it then becomes really tough to leave. So, I was thankful that that weekend happened. So I started to think about what I wanted to do next. But that was probably one of the biggest things. That was like a really eye-opening clue for me. That was like, man, you need to make a plan and get out of here. This is not what you want.
It sounds like when you are working in the company, you have to trade something. You have all those benefits like stable salary, etc. But you have to pay back with like your free time. Sometimes you have to pay back with like uncertainties, because you never know. You might be let go like just one day notice and like, oh, who knows? That's life. And then you thrown away with the skills that you've had, hopefully, during your job, but you have no skills about how to sell yourself, how to market yourself, how to talk
Yeah.
to other people. For sure, sometimes you are talking to people while doing your full-time work, and it's totally okay. But still, I meet so many people who are transitioning from full-time to freelancing, and they're like, okay, I'm an expert, I'm gonna like ruin it. And then like, wait a minute, do I have to sell myself? Do I have to
Yeah.
network? Do I have to build my personal brand? Wait a minute, what about taxes? What about am I the one to do this? Who will help me? Oh, help me, somebody.
Yeah.
But yeah, and this is the hardest problem, and they usually forgetting about it. And many people still afraid of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I'm curious. So even though you were let go, what were some of the biggest fears that you faced when leaving this 9 to 5?
I mean, money. How am I going to support myself? I lived in New York City, not the cheapest place to live. Um, that was a big one. I had started to prepare for that kind of unknowingly. I was paid pretty well. I lived with a roommate almost the entire time I was in New York, so that cut my rent down considerably. That saved me, just that move alone probably saved me over a year of runway that I was able to then, just sock away and know that I knew I could mentally detach from the idea of the paycheck, knowing that I was going to be okay if I didn't earn anything for a month or 2 months or even 6 months.
Mm.
That was a very comforting feeling. The feeling of fear, like in two ways. Like, first of all, I had no idea what I was going to do. I was afraid I didn't have anything to offer.
Mm.
And then the second part of that is, once I figured out what I was going to offer, like, what if it failed? What if it didn't work? What if I didn't know how to do it? What if I couldn't figure it out? And then I have to come, like, looking for another job. Another one for me, another big one for me. I was in New York City. I was in investment banking. It's like a very kind of status slash prestige career.
Mm.
And honestly, I loved the reaction I would get when people were like, "Oh, what do you do?" Because you inevitably get that question 5 times a day in New York City. And when you say, "I'm in investment banking," it's like, "Oh, okay." Like it was like automatic respect for some reason. Like,
Mhm.
I know it's a pretty coveted, highly coveted career. A lot of people want to go into that industry. The pay is well. It's challenging. You work with smart people. You work with executives of companies. It's a great starting point for a career. You really get a good skill set out of it. But losing that ability to say that really got me in a way I didn't expect. And even afterwards, you're like, when I opened up the fitness studio and people asked me what I did, because I was teaching fitness classes, and like, that, in my opinion, didn't have the same cachet as like, oh, I'm in investment banking. So I used to literally find myself, and I'd had to stop myself from doing this. I used to say, I run a fitness studio. I'm like, oh, I used to be in
Yeah.
investment banking. It was just something in my head. I just couldn't shake it. And so that was a tough one. I feared not having the ability to say that anymore.
Mm.
Um, and I think those were the biggest ones for me. Like, just like, how are you going to support yourself? And because that idea of a job was always in my head, and the idea of like always having to work. So I came from a middle class background. My dad worked for the United States Postal Service for 40 years. He just retired last year. And my mom worked at a doctor's office. Not a doctor, she was a receptionist. So it was this very middle class, average background. And my parents didn't have tons of money socked away. So it was like, they worked, they spent what they earned, they worked some more, they spent what they earned. They saved a little along the way, but there was never that idea planted in my head that I could like step away from work. So taking
Mm.
that step away was really frightening, and not knowing if I was going to be able to replace that income or earn any income. So that was a really big fear. That was a few that I kind of, gave me pause. Like, am I doing the right thing? Is this going to work? And you want to have the answers. You want certainty. You're just never going to get it. You're either going to, the way I looked at it was like, I can let all these fears hold me back and I can be miserable in this job that I know and that I'm kind of comfortable in, even though I don't like it. Or I can kind of shove these fears aside, tell them to shut up, make the move and see what happens. And keep in mind that none of these decisions were permanent. If it didn't work, I could go get another job. If I didn't like it, I could go get another job. It was like, for some reason we have this thing in our head that like, once we make this move, like we're jumping off a cliff or we're burning everything behind us, but we're really not. You're not married to these decisions. You can revert, you can change back.
By the way, it's very, very important point, because some people think that when they are going into freelancing or solopreneurship, like there is no way back. But like there is always way back. You have still your skills. You can apply for other pro companies, projects, whatever. And it's okay. I know some freelancers who are coming back who tried freelancing and it didn't work out, or it were not enough projects. Yeah. So it's totally good. Like you always have a plan B. So just try it, So I'm curious. What's the first step for someone who wants to try, who wants to build a solo business while still employed?
So there's many steps that you can take. Like, I like to think about, financially preparing, because there are some things that I feel you have to adjust in your head before you can get comfortable with that. And you don't have to quit your job to start freelancing. Like you can start doing these things while you're in your job. But one of the things that's having enough financial cushion did for me, like I mentioned earlier, it gave me gave me permission to emotionally detach from the idea of a paycheck, and knowing that if I didn't get one for a couple weeks or a couple months, I would be okay. That's a huge step. I mean, that's something that's very difficult to get over. So figuring out a financial plan of how you can at least stock away a few months worth of expenses, I thought to be incredibly helpful. Next thing I would suggest is, figuring out a problem that you can solve, and something, as long as it's something related to something you enjoy doing. And I find that a lot of people that I talk to, they want to, go into some sort of consulting that leverages their corporate experience, because I consider this like comfort bias. If you want to try something else, you want to go towards what is comfortable for you. Like I'm an engineer, so I know engineering, so I'm going to go do that. But I do often challenge people to think about other things they can do that may not be related to their job. It can be, that's okay. Yeah. It can be related to the job, but think about something that to kind of stretch themselves a little bit, because when you're in the corporate world, I think about it as like, sometimes if you're in a role you don't like and you're not really happy with the path you're on, it's like you're in the weeds and you're digging, and you need to step up and look above the weeds and see if you're even going in the right direction. Like, am I even going where I want to go? And if you can stop and do that and think about something that you can offer that you enjoy, I think it makes that path a lot easier to transition to also. So being aware of what you can offer and a problem that you can solve, and making sure those two things are like, you can find some connection between those two. I think that's important. And there's some exercises to figure out what those things are. Like I like to help people kind of think about things they just enjoyed in their younger days, like in childhood or teenage years, that they just did anyway. Like not because they were expecting to make money out of it, like just because they enjoyed it. So for example, I remember at 13 years old, I would be sitting in my parents' basement, like pouring through bodybuilding magazines, looking at exercises, trying to create training routines, working out. I just loved it. I just found something that I really enjoyed. So, fast forward 20 years, when I started building a fitness studio, it wasn't a surprise to me or anyone else. It was like, you've been doing this for 20 years, you love it. And I try to think if there's things like that you have that you can do. Some people, it's an easy transition. Like they like writing. So that's an easy one. Go write for somebody else. Or they like drawing, they like designing. Like that's easy. Go do website development or website design or, anything else. But other people, it becomes a little more challenging for. But I do always recommend like starting there and trying to figure out something that you enjoy doing. Because if you don't enjoy it, you're just creating for yourself another job, which you're ultimately going to end up not liking at some point anyway. That would be my first few. A lot of times too, there are people that, they're too busy. They're too busy with work. They have no time with work. So trying to figure out ways that they could like get themselves some time back from their job. I typically call it like the path of least resistance. When you're in your 9 to 5, it's like you're doing just enough work to not get fired, but you're not sticking your hand up and volunteering for projects. You're trying to, basically steal back some hours where you can, so you can then do your work, not be called out for not doing work, being present at work and all that kind of stuff. But, saving yourself or blocking yourself a few hours where you can work on whatever it is you want to do afterwards.
What role does mindset play in successful transition from employee to being a freelancer or a solopreneur?
This is an interesting question. I feel like I see this all the time, mindset this, mindset that. I am much more of an action guy. Like I get an idea and I want to go and try it right away. And because I think action builds confidence and actually strengthens your mindset. Because, I admittedly, man, I always kind of scoff when I see like, you need to journal 30 minutes every day, or you need to what's another one that I've seen on Instagram for a while that I think is now kind of manifesting and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, I can see it gives you some good energy, but I'm not going to manifest my way to 6 months of savings in my bank account. I'm not going to manifest my way to like a new business idea. It's like getting an idea, doing some brainstorming, and then taking action right away is like, I find the recipe to getting somewhere fastest. I'm sure some people would disagree with me. That's okay. That's just my own personal view. But that's my outlook on that is action. I always say this, action is the antidote. Like if you are overthinking something, just take one idea and just run with it and start doing it. You learn so much more by doing than you learn by planning and trying to think through what people are going to want or what you can actually do. Just go do it. Go learn how to do it.
I'm totally on your side because I'm also an activator. And when someone is still thinking about something, I will find out 10 ways how it doesn't work. So when someone is just only coming up with a plan, I already have 10 things that didn't work and how to improve. So 11th will work. So I totally understand. And that's why what I'm always telling to people, like, go try things, like if you don't know how to write, go like talk to ChatGPT. If you're afraid of writing a post, go write like a shittiest post on LinkedIn you could ever think of. Just push the button, post, and see what will happen. Like you won't become like a great writer or a great creator or like a great solopreneur or freelancer overnight. You still have to go a long, long ways. That's exactly what I was asking about the mindset. So it's more like many people are thinking that, oh, am I moving the right way? If I will do this thing, maybe like I will miss on other opportunities, but you will never know unless you try. So yeah, I feel like it's the craziest thing. So I'm curious, what from your perspective, when people are moving from being employed to solopreneurship, freelancing, what are common mistakes they make, and what can they do to avoid them?
This is what I get all the time, and I get messages all the time from people that I talk to. I talk to dozens of people a week in DMs and phone calls and stuff. And one of the things I always kind of like, not, I don't want to say laugh at, I don't laugh at, but I think like, oh, okay, this is a common one that everybody does. Like people message me and they're like, oh, I'm starting my business. I'm building my website. I'm doing all this stuff. I just got my LLC. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Or I'm getting my logo done. I'm like, that's great. But like, what's the problem you're solving for someone? And they have this long-winded answer. And I'm like, well, that's not clear enough. Like the way I think of it is like, before you touch any of that stuff, a logo, a website, an LLC, like if I were starting today, I wouldn't even have a website. I don't even think I need it. I tell people to focus on, the big three, as I call them. It's the problem you solve, the person you're going to solve it for, and the outcome that you were going to get for them. If you focus all the time and energy on those three things instead of a website or a logo, you'll be much better off. Because a website, look, if you're creating a website and you're making a pretty website and you have no social media presence or no way to get traffic to your website, the only person that's going to see your website are a few of your friends and your mom. Like no one's going to know it exists. So figuring out the person, the problem, and the outcome, and then sharing content about that on social media, you will learn so much more and interact with so much more people than you would ever building your own website before you have an audience. To me, that doesn't make any sense. It's backwards. And that's what I say. That's what I would see is probably the most common mistake. Now, I don't know if that's the biggest mistake, but I would say it's the most common that I see.
When I was reading books about building products, etc., my mind, I just it was blown away when I read that you don't really have to build a product. You can create like a very, very simple landing page with like subscribe button or something like that, and see, like, try some advertisement, try some reaching out to people and see if they would buy your product, and even ask them like to give some amount of money upfront to see if it's like a really good idea. Because I thought that you have to build a product and only after that you can go. But then I was like, no, not really. And I feel like in solopreneurship and freelancing, it's pretty much the same idea. You don't have to have an amazing website or like the best offer ever. Just write down what you do. Just go ask people, would they hire you? Do they know
Yeah.
someone who might hire you? Like, do they need any of your solutions that you propose into them? And
Yeah.
yeah, but
So I made that mistake. So I bought a course on how to make courses, how to make and sell courses. This was probably, I want to say, 3 years ago. I had an audience on Instagram, not a big one, like 10,000 followers or whatever. Um, so I bought this course. It was like $2,000. It taught you the course to build, how to come up with your idea, how to niche down and get what you want to talk about. It taught you how to launch it, all this stuff. And I spent like 3 or 4 months holed up in a. I did a little bit of it in Mexico. I did a little bit in the United States. I did a little bit in Europe. I like build it all over the place.
mm,
And I spent 3 to 4 months building it. And I was like, okay, we're going to launch. It's going to make me a few $1,000. Crickets. I sold zero. And the couple of things that I think about that jump out at me as mistakes there were, I just guessed what people would want when they were figuring out what they wanted to do when they were leaving their job. I
mm,
guessed, I put everything I had into it, all the information all the information that I essentially had in my brain, I wrote out and I put in this course. But I didn't really learn what people really needed until I started doing one-on-one coaching. That's when you really start to understand where people need the most help and how to like talk to them, how to talk about that problem and solution in a way that's appealing to them. Because I just put stuff out there and didn't really understand what the immediate needs were. I just thought this is what people would want. And so getting out there and building something before you talk to anybody, that would probably be the biggest mistake. The most common one is working on things that don't matter off the bat. That's probably the biggest one, like building something before you actually know what people want. And there's only a couple ways to get to know what people want. It's either just interviewing random people, like you mentioned, that you think would need that, or doing one-on-one coaching or consulting work for a while beforehand. And then once you get maybe 15, 20 clients under your belt, the way I think of it is like, if you have 20 clients, they all roughly have slightly different starting and end points.
mm.
But what you will find out after you've worked with 15 or 20 clients is that they all have like the middle 5 to 7 things that they all need. It's kind of like a bell curve, right? So the outer ends, not everyone will need them, but the meat, everyone will need the middle. Like, and you
Yeah.
can build a course with the middle and do much better with it, because you'll know exactly the problems that people are dealing with and how to write stuff about your product that shows them that you can solve it for them.
What's one very important but really small step that freelancers or people who want to become full-time freelancers, solopreneurs can take right away to set them up for future success?
One small step they could take right now. What I would say is, once you've come up with your idea for your service or whatever you want to offer it to someone for free. Do it for someone for free. You learn what they need. You learn to do, you learn to, perform or deliver on the service that you want to provide. And you can also get a testimonial. So like, in my view, both people win. Like, the person that you're helping gets help for a discounted or a free rate. Like my first couple clients, I offered my coaching service half price in exchange for a video testimonial. So the people that I was working with got help, and I got help too, because they gave me a video that said they enjoyed working with me and here's what I helped them do, blah, blah, blah. And then I can go and share that to help me attract more clients. So that's a pretty simple one. You don't really have to have a big offer. It could just be, hey, I'm going to work with you on this problem. We're going to do this in this amount of time. And it's going to take 3 phone calls, and it's going to be free. It's going to be once a week for the next 3 weeks. can I offer this to you? And if you know people that are suffering from that, I mean, why would somebody say no to that?
Yeah. Now, Brian, I wish to have the sky's limit, but time is the limit to our conversation. So the final question, what is your favorite food?
Oh, what is my favorite food? Great question. I'm gonna go two answers here. If I'm doing like a dessert and a non-dessert. My favorite dessert is brownies. I
Hmm.
absolutely love brownies. And I would say the non-dessert food, it's a tie. I would say I would say if I'm going healthy, eggs. If I'm going not healthy, pizza.
That's how it works. You always have to do some
I can't just give one, man.
choices.
I'd say
Yeah, yeah.
different foods for different things.
And what is the best way to connect with you?
um, LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active, and my I guess the back part of my link there is Brian D. Gallagher. You can find me at my website, which is simplemanguide.com. I'm also on Instagram, but not very active anymore. I used to be way more active, and that is Simple Man Guide.
Got it, Brian. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, and it's been such a
Sure.
pleasure to hear and learn from you.
Thanks, Yuri. Nice to meet you.
Very much likewise. And thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, hit the like button or 5 stars and share it with your friend. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.